looking for these links, but again, more questions than answers at this time. Now, to that effect, the mayor is asking New Yorkers to help with the investigation and stay vigilant. Anyone with videos or photos is asked to hand them over. They are promising to beef up the security presence in the streets here of New York. They say there will be a heightened police presence, not only New York police officers, but state police and National Guardsmen. 1,000 have been added to the patrols. And this is happening right as we head into UN General Assembly Week here in New York, where there is typically a huge security presence in the street because you have dozens of world leaders gathering for this big event at the United Nations. So even more than we normally see state, local, federal police on the streets for that, even more will be out trying to reassure nervous New Yorkers as this investigation moves forward.
Okay, Kristen Salumi keeping up with events in New York for us. Thanks very much. ISIL has claimed responsibility for a stabbing attack in the US state of Minnesota that injured 8 people. An Islamic State-run news agency says the man who stabbed and wounded people at a mall in St. Cloud, Minnesota, was an ISIL soldier. Authorities say the man impersonated a security guard and mentioned Allah during the attack. An off-duty police officer shot and killed the attacker. None of the victims had life-threatening wounds. Much more still to come here on Al Jazeera, including bad news for German Chancellor Angela Merkel. We'll be live in Berlin with the latest on state parliamentary elections there. And pointing the finger at Pakistan, India's Prime Minister condemns an attack on a military base in Indian-administered Kashmir.
Heavy rain affecting the Eastern Cape over the last day or so. That looks as though it's clearing away. So much of the region is going to be enjoying fine weather conditions, temperature of 20 in Cape Town. As we head on through into Tuesday, not a great deal of change. Temperature around the 30 mark for much of Namibia, Botswana and up into Zambia. So let's head northwards where things are still looking more lively across this central strip. Particularly I think towards Cameroon we've got some heavy rain at the moment, and the forecast suggests there'll be further heavy rain developing over the next 24 to 48 hours. Some showers also likely across parts of West Africa, across Senegal, the Gambia. We've even had 1 or 2 significant rainfall reports from Mauritania just getting towards the end of the rainy season before the rains start to move back towards the south once again. But Bamako in Mali may well pick up the odd shower with highs here of 32 degrees. As we move into North Africa, we've got low pressure through the Mediterranean, so quite strong winds likely to be affecting coastal parts of Algeria and Tunisia. Indeed, all the way through the Mediterranean, it's looking a bit breezy and slightly stormy seas at times. The strong winds continue to head on through into Tuesday. Should be a warm one though in Cairo, with temperatures here of 38 degrees.
Top stories on Al Jazeera. The Syrian ceasefire is looking increasingly fragile after Russian airstrikes hit the besieged city of Aleppo. It's the first time the city has been struck since the 7-day pause in fighting began on Monday. Syria's army says it's regained some of the ground it lost to ISIL in Deir ez-Zor after a US-led air raid killed dozens of Syrian soldiers. The Pentagon says they were targeting ISIL fighters. And a bomb blast that injured 29 people on Saturday night in New York doesn't appear to be the work of an international group. That's according to the governor of New York State. All of those injured have now been released from hospital. Well, traditionally leftist Berlin is set to see a return of the far right to its state parliament for the first time since the Second World War. Exit polls just out show Angela Merkel continuing to pay the price for her open-door refugee policy, with serious gains being made by an anti-immigrant party. The Social Democrats look to remain the largest party in the capital, but it looks like their share of the vote has fallen from 30% to 23%. Merkel's Christian Democrats are projected to pick up the second biggest share of the vote with 18%, but that's their worst ever result in Berlin. The polls suggest it's the anti-immigrant Alternative for Germany, or AfD, party which is making inroads. It's predicted to win around 11.5% of the vote. That would see it secure seats in Berlin's state parliament for the first time. Well, let's go now to Dominic Kane, who's in Berlin for more on this. Dominic, a couple of seismic shifts, if you like, coming through here. AfD, the Alternative for Germany, on the rise. Angela Merkel falling.
Well, falling, I think, is perhaps a little bit too strong. Certainly her party's showing here, as you say, is the worst it has had since the end of the Second World War. Likewise, for the Alternative for Germany party, an 11%, 12% showing is a considerable boon for them. But it's worth making the point that they were coming from a zero base because the party didn't exist the last time this city-state elected its parliament. The winners are probably the Social Democrats, even though they have lost a share of the vote from the last time. But it is worth making the point that this rise of the far right, we need to be careful in saying too much about that, because opinion polls in the months and weeks leading up to this election suggested that the Alternative for Germany party would do better than they appear to have done this time around. But certainly insofar as the national picture is concerned, this is a bad moment for Angela Merkel.
Well, if not falling, then I was going to ask you, it certainly doesn't bode particularly well for her in terms of the 2017 national election. What's she doing to counter this sort of attack on her numbers? It's all about the refugees, isn't it?
Well, exactly that is the case, Jonah. An opinion poll, or an exit poll that was commissioned by one of the main German television channels suggests that amongst those who voted today, 44% said that the refugee crisis had been the main motivating factor in helping them choose which party they wanted to support. And then another stat, which perhaps is more concerning for the Christian Democrats of Angela Merkel than that first one, is that amongst those who voted AfD, Alternative for Germany today, twice as many people who had previously supported Merkel's party voted AfD than had the Social Democrats. And of course, the point to make here is that the federal coalition between the Christian Democrats and Social Democrats had agreed on the policy of the how to deal with the refugees, and have done so for the past 18 months or so. So you have this clear suggestion that the electorate here in Berlin, at least, nearly most of the electors say refugees are the most important issue, and amongst those who moved to the AfD, more went to the AfD from the Christian Democrats of Merkel than from the Social Democrats. Now the question is, looking forward 1 year from now, how many of the existing CDU members of the Bundestag, the federal parliament, will want to lose votes, lose seats 12 months from now? That's a question that Merkel will be contemplating tonight and in the days and weeks to come.
Dominic Kane there in Berlin. Voting has just ended in Russia's parliamentary elections. Once again, pro-Kremlin parties are expected to dominate post after a stint as prime minister. He annexed Crimea from Ukraine, and this, combined with the country's involvement in the conflicts in Ukraine and Syria, worsened relations with the West, resulting in punitive sanctions against Russia. These and the fall in global oil prices plunged the country into economic crisis. The Kremlin has also made it almost impossible to demonstrate, meaning we're unlikely to see the mass protests that followed the 2011 election over allegations of ballot box fraud. Well, Russians had 14 parties to choose from as they voted for 450 MPs to represent them in the lower house, known as the State Duma. Turnout was expected to be low because of widespread voter apathy. The election has caused heightened tensions in Ukraine, with scuffles outside the Russian embassy in Kiev as people tried to vote there. At least one protester was arrested as Ukrainian activists tried to block the embassy's entrance, but in Crimea, voting seemed to be relatively peaceful. The region was taking part in Russian elections for the first time since it was annexed from Ukraine in 2014. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel is boosting security ahead of the Jewish holidays because of a recent spike in violence in the occupied Palestinian territories. A Palestinian has been shot by the Israeli army and taken to hospital after stabbing an Israeli army officer in the occupied West Bank on Sunday. In Hebron on Saturday, another Palestinian man stabbed a soldier before being shot dead. 4 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied Palestinian territories since Friday. Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for a car bomb that killed a Somali general and 5 of his bodyguards on Sunday. The attack happened near the Somali Defense Ministry compound in the capital Mogadishu. It comes ahead of parliamentary and presidential elections due to be held later in the month. The armed group Al-Shabaab wants to topple the Western-backed government of President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed. Gunmen have killed at least 17 soldiers in an attack on a military base in Indian-administered Kashmir. It happened near the disputed border with Pakistan-administered Kashmir. The Indian Prime Minister has described it as a cowardly terror attack, in his words, and is pointing the finger at Pakistan. Bernard Smith has more.
India's military says 4 fighters got into the base before dawn on Sunday. There was a troop rotation going on at the time, so there were more soldiers than is usual. Most of the casualties were sleeping in a tent that caught fire. A gun battle lasted for several hours at the base, which is close to the border with Pakistan. The military death toll is the worst in Indian-administered Kashmir since a raid in December 2014. India's military says there's evidence a Pakistan-based group, Jaish-e-Mohammed, is behind the attack.
Since the terrorists had some items which had Pakistani markings on that, I have spoken to the Pakistan Director General of Military Operations and conveyed our serious concerns about the same.
Pakistan's foreign ministry rejected the allegations that it was involved in the attack. India and Pakistan both claim the Jammu and Kashmir region, but they rule only parts of it. There have been more than 2 months of protests in India's only Muslim-majority region after the killing of a popular separatist field commander. This was the funeral on Saturday in Srinagar of one of more than 80 civilians who have been killed in fighting on the streets with Indian security forces. They've been accused by human rights groups of using excessive force, including shotguns that fire pellets. Pakistan says the UN and international community should investigate what it alleges are atrocities committed by Indian security forces. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera.
A moment of silence will be observed at Sunday's Paralympics closing ceremony in Rio for the cyclist killed in a crash while racing the day before. Sarafraz Bahman Golbernazad from Iran crashed on a mountainous stretch of the C45 event on Saturday. He was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at hospital. It's the first death at the Paralympics since the event began in 1960.
This is an absolutely tragic day for the Paralympic movement and also for the Games here in Rio. I learnt about this situation at approximately 1 o'clock this afternoon, and it's changed the way that I feel today, obviously, and I think I should say to you all that the most sincere and deep condolences from the Paralympic family, and I think that's important from the family, go to
be many festivals that could give the city a much-needed boost. Andy Gallagher reports.
Like many mining communities in the US, Butte has seen better days. At its peak, more than a quarter of the world's copper was produced here, but the mines now sit idle, and the population's steeply declined.
This is going to be logos and movies, yeah?
Yeah.
When filmmaker Don Andrews moved here a year ago, he saw a unique opportunity and a city ready to embrace Butte's first film festival. Since the inception of the Coverlight Festival, he and his team have received wide support and hopes are high.
We have a lot of really good films from all over, but we also have a lot of really good films from Montana. And I really want people to walk out and be like, you know, those guys in Montana, they know how to make movies. We want to go there.
U.S. Department of Immigration.
Filmmakers from all over the world have entered close to 100 movies, and for those who've spent time at other festivals, there is cautious optimism.
I think it could happen. It might take a few years to really get going, but I think if they get good programming and they can attract people, they get enough publicity, then it should really snowball.
This is our Park Street suite. We have two of them. This has a queen bed and a king bed.
Ted Ackerman